Hi, and welcome to a short and sweet video where I'm going to explore the idea of brake lines going bad on a vehicle. This is your brake line. This one has been cut apart, of course, so it's in pieces. And the reason I'm making this video is because I really want to share some knowledge that was shared with me, and maybe it'll make someone get through a job a little easier. So I had put brakes on one of our cars, front brakes, including new rotors and new calipers, and of course new pads. And after a short while, it was my wife's car. She had one of the calipers stick and really cook the brake pad on the passenger side. And it was very obvious. It was smoking, it was very hot, and it smelled hot. So something was wrong. And now this is on a car with a lot of miles, but the brakes had been replaced before, kind of regular maintenance had been performed. And for some reason, I decided not to buy new hoses when I did the job. If you don't have new hoses, you don't have to break into the system and then have the possibility of air getting in and having to bleed the brakes, which was just a step I thought I could avoid. And I think the hose that I have here has a little better than 100,000 miles on it. As far as years, it's probably about 7 years old, 6 years old, something like that. So it wasn't like it was on a classic vehicle found out in the woods. It was newer than the vehicle. But what happened was I could not figure out why the caliper was stuck. And I'm going to show you a caliper. So in case you don't know the system, this is your brake rotor. This is what sits behind your tire and obviously spins. You can see the holes for your studs there where your lug nuts go. And then you have a caliper, and this is the actual caliper from the car. I don't know which side it is, but it sits something like this. It should be like that. And you would have the ability to take this off. And so I did. I put a new one of these on. It's getting kind of old. And the pads sit in there. And here's a pair of brake pads. These go in here. Something like that. There's one there. And there's one here. And that rotor spins right in here. And so when these squeeze together, they pinch the rotor. And what causes those to move is your piston. And your piston goes right up against the shoe, and it sits inside this hole right here. It goes in here. You can see that this fits. Now this is rusty. It's been outside a little while, but this I kept inside. So this is nice and clean like it normally would be. And so when I took these apart, I noticed that even these didn't have any sticking. I had put new ones on, but these are pretty old. And what will happen sometimes on a caliper's piston is that this will rust. You'll get some contaminants in there. I've had it on an older vehicle. This is a piston from a truck, so you can see it's bigger than the car. But it has some corrosion right around here. And that goes all the way around up here, just a little bit. This is really not rust as much as it is just some sort of buildup. Okay, and these stuck as well. I had started this brake job a while back, and then I took these apart to see because I was curious because these brakes didn't have many miles on them and they just were very old. It's on a pickup I don't use very much. Okay, so those are your pistons, and those have to slide in and out. And if those get stuck, they sit there and they press against your shoe, and they'll press the shoe, but they won't release. They won't slide back into the bore of the piston on the caliper, and these will sit there and rub, and that's exactly what I had going on. And if you've never experienced that, it's a little bit strange because your brakes smell and they smoke sometimes if you've been driving in stop and go traffic, that kind of thing. And then when you go on the highway, they still are on and then they get really hot. All right, so let's talk about the brake line. I was told by a friend who has a lot more mechanical experience than I, said, you know, I've seen it before where the hoses get pinched or they somehow get, I don't want to say corroded, but they disintegrate inside. And I thought, sure, okay, that makes sense because I've seen bad brake lines before. So I took this one off, and I don't know if you can see that, but you can see the hole is not very big. There's a lot of material, a lot of winding and wrapping to make these carry quite a bit of pressure. And I guess these do swell a little bit when you use them if you really hit on the brakes. So there's a little bit of flex back and forth. And he said where the bracket attaches, there's usually a metal bracket like that. And this holds to the car and keeps this line in place a little bit. He said where this is, the pressure swells ever so slightly on the other sides of where this bracket is clamped on there permanently. Okay, and I had to bend that and really wiggle it off of there. I even cut the backside to make it a little easier. So he said, take a look at that. Okay, well, I cut off the end. This is the end that goes onto the caliper. Got a little nipple right there that fits into that hole, and then you put a screw in here with a copper crush washer that holds that nice and tight, and it's not going to leak. Well, he said run a wire through that. So here we go. Run a wire through it, he said, and see if it finds a spot that stops. Nothing obvious on this one. That wire goes through without any obstruction, at least that I can feel. I'm not going to cut this one open, but what I want to do is I want to see if this one has any obstruction in it. So let's cut this one and see if this one is different. Take that end off. That boot's pretty hard to get off of there, so I'm going to cut that as well. Just without taking that bracket off, I want to see if I can get this wire through this one at all. Oh, there's still fluid in there too. You can see, well, I can see it dripping out. So that tells me there's definitely something that has been holding in fluid. Look at that. Right like he said, right at that bracket. Well, Dale, I got to give you credit. You were spot on. Because look at that. The wire goes in this far, and it wants to stop. And that's even with fluid on it. There was fluid trapped in here because it couldn't drain out the backside. Try that one more time. Actually, I'll go the other way. Let's see this. Yep, and you can see the fluid coming out. This has been in there for a few weeks now since I did that job. Look at that. Well, thanks, Dale Peters. That was a great bit of advice. I knew that you could have bad hoses, but boy, he knows from experience because this is exactly right. Right where that bracket is in there, something has changed. I'm going to cut these apart on my own time. I was going to slit these down the middle. Maybe I can do this one just for the video here to see what the inside actually looks like. Yes, indeed, a brake line, even though it's flexible and it doesn't have any obvious signs from the outside, there's no cracking on this. Nothing obvious. When I looked at it, I inspect them all the time. I didn't see any weather cracking or anything like that. But somehow, at that bracket, that plugged it up. And just another note on that, you're probably wondering, well, how did you not notice that and how did you not figure it out without getting advice? Well, I did figure it out because when I had the caliper on the new caliper that was sticking, remember it was a new caliper, I took it off, I wiggled it off so that it would come off of the rotor. I set it aside, I put a C-clamp on it, and like is kind of typical, I had that piston and I put a C-clamp on here and I tried to push it back in. And even with the C-clamp, it wouldn't budge. So I knew something was up. But of course, at that point, I couldn't see inside. You don't know if there's corrosion or some flaw in the manufacturing. But guess what? As soon as I went back here, and as soon as I cracked this line open, it relieves the pressure, and then that went right in for me. So then I knew it was upstream towards the car. I was hoping that it was in the line because the lines were pretty cheap. They're not expensive to buy. But that definitely was the case. So again, you can have bad brake lines. I know that I've seen online and other places I've read that they recommend changing those every 5 years. I find that a little bit ridiculous because I've had vehicles with the same brake lines for much longer than that and high miles. Seems like everything they make that's rubber now, they want to tell you to replace it as soon as it could go bad. But again, these were not old in my mind. These were probably 7 years old, and they did not show any signs of wear except internally, probably because this corrosion gets in there. Maybe that shrinks it and crushes it. I don't know. But that wire will not go through there. All right, well, I hope you found this video information good, and maybe it'll help you make a decision on whether to pay the extra $50 or so to replace your lines on your next brake job. In my mind, I've learned a good lesson that it's not always the visual on the outside for brake lines that matters. These have to sit there on the road and they have to go up and down and flex with your wheel. So it makes sense that they're getting wear and tear on the internals as well. All right, well, I hope that helps.